A single dad stopped his car for an injured dog, but when the owner's thank you left him shaking, he uncovered a truth so powerful it could tear them apart or bind them forever. What secret was hidden in her gratitude? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The headlights cut through October mist as Daniel Harris guided his old Ford down County Road 7. His back ached from 8 hours of mopping floors and emptying trash bins at Jefferson High, but the pain faded against thoughts of home. Maggie would be asleep on Mrs. Lawson's couch by now, wrapped in that quilt she'd dragged everywhere since Sarah died. The heater rattled, pushing warm air that smelled of old coffee and industrial cleaner. Daniel rolled his shoulders, working out the knots. 3 more miles. Then he could slip Maggie into her own bed, heat up leftover soup, and catch 4 hours of sleep before his morning shift at the warehouse. A shape moved in the darkness ahead. Daniel's foot hit the brake hard. The truck skidded, tires screaming against wet asphalt. His work thermos crashed to the floor. The seatbelt dug into his chest as the Ford lurched to a stop sideways across the empty road. His heart hammered. Through the windshield, caught in the harsh glare of headlights, a golden retriever dragged itself toward the ditch. One back leg hung wrong. Blood matted the fur along its side. Daniel threw open the door. Cold air bit through his janitor's uniform. The dog collapsed into the tall grass, sides heaving. Easy, boy. Daniel dropped to his knees in the wet gravel. Easy now. The dog's eyes rolled toward him. Brown, frightened, but somehow trusting. Its tail moved, just a twitch really, but trying to wag. Blood seeped through golden fur where something, a car, had to be a car, had caught its hip. Daniel's hands moved with the same careful precision he'd learned patching up soldiers years ago, checking for breaks, looking for deeper wounds. The dog whimpered when he touched its back leg, but didn't snap or pull away. Got yourself in trouble, didn't you? Daniel pulled off his jacket, not caring about the cold. Can't leave you here. The retriever weighed at least 70 pounds. Daniel slid his arms underneath, remembering how to lift with his legs, not his back. The dog's head lolled against his shoulder, warm breath puffed against his neck. The truck's passenger door stuck like always. Daniel balanced the dog's weight, yanking hard until it popped open. He laid the retriever across the bench seat, as gentle as he'd once tucked Maggie into her crib. Stay with me. He cranked the engine. Vet's only 5 minutes. The dog's eyes drifted closed. No, come on. Daniel reached over, stroking the soft head as he drove one-handed. The speedometer climbed past 40, 50, pushing the old Ford harder than he had in years. Got a little girl who'd never forgive me if I let something happen to you. Main Street blurred past, the courthouse, the diner where Maggie liked pancakes on Saturdays. Daniel took the turn onto Maple too fast, tires squealing. The retriever's breathing grew shallow. Almost there, Daniel's voice cracked. Doc Morrison's gonna fix you right up. Best vet in 3 counties, even if his bedside manner needs work. The small brick building appeared through the mist. Morrison's veterinary clinic. A single light glowed in the reception area. The emergency number was posted on the door, but Daniel had seen Doc's truck parked around back. The old man practically lived there since his wife passed. Daniel slammed the truck into park, not bothering to turn off the engine. The dog barely stirred when he gathered it up again. Its weight felt heavier now, limp and unresponsive. The glass doors were locked. Daniel kicked at them with his work boot. Doc Morrison! Nothing. He kicked harder, the glass rattling in its frame. The dog's head hung over his arm. Help! I need help out here. A light flicked on in the back. Footsteps. Doc Morrison appeared, pulling on his white coat over pajamas, squinting through wire-rimmed glasses. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Got a dog here, Daniel gasped. Hit by a car, I think. Found him on County Road 7. Doc's hands were already moving, checking pupils, feeling for a pulse. Treatment room, now. They rushed down the narrow hallway. Daniel's boots left muddy prints on the clean linoleum. The dog's blood had soaked through his uniform shirt. "Set him here." Doc pointed to the steel examination table. "Easy." Daniel lowered the retriever onto the cold surface. The dog's eyes fluttered open, focusing on Daniel's face. "You're okay now," Daniel whispered. "Doc's gonna take care of you." The tail moved again, stronger this time. A real wag, just once before the eyes closed again. Doc Morrison pulled on latex gloves, already reaching for supplies. "No collar. You know whose dog this is?" "Never seen him before." "Well, somebody's missing him." Doc's hands worked fast, cleaning wounds, checking vitals. "Golden retriever, maybe 3 years old, well fed. Somebody loves this dog." Daniel stepped back, suddenly aware of the blood on his clothes, the mud on his boots, the way his hands shook. Somewhere in town, someone was probably searching, calling out a name into the darkness, checking every street, every yard. He knew that kind of searching, that desperate hope. The dog's breathing steadied under Doc's care. The clinic door burst open behind them. A nurse in purple scrubs wheeled a stretcher down the hall, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. "Let's get him transferred." She helped Doc Morrison lift the retriever onto the gurney. "Dr. Patel just arrived. He'll take over." Daniel watched them wheel the dog through swinging doors marked "Staff Only." Blood still stained his hands. He found the restroom, scrubbed until the water ran clear, then returned to the empty waiting room. The front door crashed open. A woman stumbled in, coat hanging off one shoulder, buttons done wrong, hair wild from the wind. Her eyes were swollen, red, searching frantically. "I'm looking for—" She stopped. Through the glass window of the treatment room, the golden retriever lay on the table. "Buddy!" She rushed past Daniel, pushing through the swinging doors. Nobody tried to stop her. "Buddy! Oh, God! Buddy!" Her knees hit the floor beside the table. The dog's tail thumped weakly at her voice. "Where did you go?" "I've been looking everywhere." Dr. Patel, a young man with steady hands and kind eyes, looked up from his examination. "Ma'am, is this your dog?" Yes, he's mine." Her fingers found Buddy's ear, stroking the soft spot he loved. "He got out through the fence. The storm last night knocked a board loose. I didn't know." She turned to Daniel, who'd followed her in. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "You found him?" Daniel nodded. "County Road 7, near the old mill. That's 3 miles from my house. 3 miles." Her voice broke. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I was so scared." The words tumbled out between sobs. Thank you became a prayer, repeated over and over. Daniel shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the intensity of her gratitude. He'd just done what anyone would do, what needed doing. Dr. Patel's hands moved over Buddy's body, gentle but thorough. "Mrs. Whitfield." Grace Whitfield. "Mrs. Whitfield, Buddy has a fractured femur in his right hind leg. There's significant bruising along his rib cage, possibly some internal bleeding, but his vitals are stable." He met her eyes directly. "He's lucky. Another hour out there, the shock alone might have—" Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "We need to operate immediately," Dr. Patel continued. "Set the leg, check for internal damage. He's young and strong. I believe he'll pull through. Do whatever you need to do." Grace stood, wiping her face with her sleeve. "Whatever it costs." The nurse handed her a clipboard thick with forms. Grace's hands shook as she wrote. Daniel noticed her wedding ring was gone, just a pale band of skin where it used to be. "I can help," Daniel said. "With the bill, I mean. It's no trouble." Grace looked up sharply. No, you've done enough. More than enough." She returned to the paperwork, pen moving fast. "This is my responsibility." They moved to the waiting room while the surgical team prepared. Grace collapsed into a plastic chair, exhaustion replacing panic. Daniel sat 2 seats away, giving her space. "He's not just a pet." Her voice was quiet now, drained. "Buddy's my therapy dog. Trained and everything. After my divorce, and with Mom getting worse. She rubbed her eyes. Some days he's the only reason I get out of bed. Daniel understood that. After Sarah died, Maggie had been his only reason for plenty of mornings. Your mom's sick? Dementia. Early stages, but getting worse. I moved back home to take care of her 6 months ago. Left everything in Chicago. My job, my life. A bitter laugh. Not that there was much left after Richard decided his secretary understood him better. Daniel's phone buzzed. Maggie's picture lit up the screen. Hey, sweetheart. Dad? Mrs. Lawson made pot roast, but I saved you some. When are you coming home? Soon, baby. I found a friend who needed help. What kind of friend? Daniel glanced at Grace, who was staring at the surgery doors. A dog. He got hurt, but the doctor's fixing him up. Is he going to be okay? I think so. Good. Can I meet him sometime? We'll see. Don't stay up too late, okay? School tomorrow. Love you, Dad. Love you too. Grace was watching him when he hung up. Your daughter? Maggie, she's 10. Just you and her? 3 years now. Grace nodded slowly, recognizing something in his voice. The same tone she probably used when people asked about her divorce. Loss acknowledged, but not discussed. The surgery doors opened. Dr. Patel emerged, pulling off his surgical cap. He's stable. The surgery went well. We'll need to monitor him overnight, but I'm optimistic. Grace sagged with relief. Can I see him? Once he's in recovery. Give us 20 minutes. She turned to Daniel, fresh tears threatening. Her hand found his arm, squeezing tight. You don't know what you've done for me tonight. Her voice was barely a whisper. You saved him. You saved us both. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He'd just stopped for a dog in the road, done what was right. But looking at Grace's face, the relief, the gratitude, the fragile hope, he wondered if maybe he'd done more than he knew. The waiting room clock ticked past midnight, then 1, then 2. Daniel had called Mrs. Lawson, explained the situation. The elderly neighbor, bless her heart, said she'd sleep on the couch and keep an ear out for Maggie. Grace hadn't moved from her plastic chair. She stared at the recovery room doors like she could will them open. Coffee? Daniel held out a paper cup from the vending machine. Fair warning, it tastes like burnt rubber. She took it gratefully. Burnt rubber sounds perfect right now. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping the terrible coffee. The clinic's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a cat yowled. Richard hated dogs. Grace's voice cut through the quiet, said they were too needy, too much work. She laughed, hollow and sharp. Funny how he had no problem being needy with his 23-year-old secretary. Daniel stayed quiet. Sometimes people just needed to talk. 15 years of marriage. I gave up my career, moved to the suburbs, played the perfect corporate wife. She picked at the cup's rim. Then Mom started forgetting things. Little stuff at first, where she put her keys, what day it was. When the diagnosis came, I asked Richard to help me figure out care options. You know what he said? Daniel waited. He said it wasn't his problem. His actual words. My mother, who'd welcomed him into our family, who'd loved him like a son, wasn't his problem. Her knuckles went white around the cup. 2 weeks later, I found the credit card charges. Hotel rooms, jewelry that wasn't for me. I'm sorry. Don't be. The divorce was the easy part. Moving back here, watching Mom slip away, a little more each day. She wiped her eyes. Buddy was my therapist's idea. Said I needed something that depended on me. Something to get me out of my own head. Smart woman. Daniel understood that need. After Sarah died, taking care of Maggie had been the only thing that kept him upright. What about you? Grace asked. Your wife? Cancer. Started in her lungs, spread everywhere else. The words came easier now, 3 years later. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. Maggie was 7. God, I'm so sorry. Sarah was the strong one. Right up to the end, she was making lists. Which dentist to use, how to do Maggie's hair for picture day, recipes for my legendary inability to cook. He smiled at the memory. She even interviewed babysitters from her hospital bed. She sounds amazing. She was. But Maggie's amazing too. She's got her mom's heart. Sees the good in everything. Grace studied him over her coffee cup. Must be hard. Doing it all alone. You get used to it. Work, school, homework, bedtime. Repeat. He shrugged. Mrs. Lawson helps, and Maggie's more grown up than she should have to be. Kids are resilient. Too resilient sometimes. The recovery room doors swung open. Dr. Patel emerged, looking tired but pleased. Buddy's awake. Groggy but responsive. The surgery went perfectly. We repaired the fracture and found only minor internal bruising. He'll need to stay on restricted activity for several weeks, but I expect a full recovery. Grace's sob was pure relief. She grabbed Daniel's hand, squeezing hard. Can I see him? Of course. He's been asking for you. Dogs don't ask, Daniel started. You'd be surprised. Dr. Patel smiled. This way. Buddy lay on a padded table, IV in his front leg, his hind leg wrapped and immobilized. His tail thumped weakly when he saw Grace. Hey, sweet boy. She knelt beside him, stroking his ears. You scared me so bad. Buddy's tongue found her hand. His eyes, cloudy from medication, still held that special dog wisdom. Everything would be okay now that his person was here. Grace looked up at Daniel, tears streaming freely. Thank you. I know I keep saying it, but thank you. How can I ever repay you? You don't owe me anything. But I do. You stopped when you didn't have to. You brought him here, stayed all night. It was the right thing to do. Gee, before Grace could argue, the clinic door chimed. Mrs. Lawson shuffled in, her quilted housecoat buttoned wrong, Maggie beside her in pajamas and sneakers. Maggie Harris, what are you doing here? Daniel stood quickly. I couldn't sleep. Maggie's eyes were already searching past him. Is the dog okay? He's fine, but... Maggie had already spotted Buddy through the doorway. She walked over slowly, respectfully, the way Daniel had taught her to approach unfamiliar animals. What's his name? Buddy, Grace said softly. Maggie knelt beside Grace. Her small hand hovered over Buddy's head. Can I pet him? Gentle? He's very sore. Maggie's touch was feather-light. Buddy's tail thumped harder. Hi, Buddy. I'm Maggie. My dad saved you. She looked at the bandages. Does it hurt? Buddy licked her hand. He likes you, Grace said, voice thick. I like him too. Maggie continued her gentle strokes. My. The farmhouse kitchen smelled like vanilla and old wood. Grace moved between the stove and counter, cracking eggs into a bowl while butter sizzled in the pan. Morning light filtered through faded curtains, revealing water stains on the ceiling and a crack running down one wall. You didn't have to do this, Daniel said from the doorway, still holding Buddy. It's the least I can do. Besides, you both must be starving. Grace gestured to the worn oak table. Sit, please. Daniel settled Buddy into a large basket near the corner, lined with quilts that had seen better days. The dog sighed and curled up, exhausted from the ordeal. Maggie immediately gravitated toward him, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the basket. Can I stay here with him? Let him rest, sweetheart, Daniel said. Come eat first. Just 5 more minutes? Maggie's hand rested on Buddy's side, rising and falling with his breathing. Grace smiled. It's okay. He likes the company. The house told its own story. Beautiful bones beneath obvious neglect, crown molding with chipped paint, hardwood floors that needed refinishing, a stone fireplace with a mantel crowded with dusty photographs. Through the doorway, Daniel glimpsed a living room with sheets covering most of the furniture. Coffee? Grace held up a pot. Please. She poured, her movements efficient despite her exhaustion. The mug was chipped but clean. Everything here seemed to exist in that state, broken but cared for. The house was my parents', Grace explained, following his gaze. I grew up here, moved back last year when things got bad. She flipped pancakes onto a platter, their edges perfectly golden. Simple food, but made with attention. Maggie, breakfast. His daughter reluctantly left Buddy's side, sliding into a chair. Grace set down plates, pancakes, scrambled eggs, toast cut into triangles. This looks amazing, Maggie said, already reaching for the syrup. Easy on that, Daniel warned. Let her enjoy it. Grace's smile was genuine, watching Maggie drench her pancakes. I haven't cooked for anyone but Mom in months. It's nice having people to feed again. They ate quietly for a moment. The kitchen felt warm despite the draft from the windows. Buddy snored softly in his basket. Daddy, Buddy likes me already. Maggie spoke through a mouthful of pancake. Don't talk with your mouth full. But he does. When I pet him, his tail went thump, 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 even though he's hurt. Grace's eyes softened. Animals know good people. Buddy's always been an excellent judge of character. Can we visit him again? Daniel caught Grace's eye. She nodded slightly. We'll see. That means no. Maggie's face fell. That means we'll see. Grace stood to refill coffee cups. You're welcome any time, both of you. Buddy would love the company during his recovery. Really? Maggie bounced in her seat. Really? In fact, Grace stopped, seeming to reconsider. Well, I could use the help. I'm not exactly. She gestured vaguely at the house. Things have been tight since the divorce. Mom's medical bills, the house falling apart, and now Buddy's surgery. The kitchen felt suddenly smaller. But we'll manage, Grace added quickly. We always do. Daniel recognized the tone, pride fighting with desperation. He'd used it himself plenty of times. Grace's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face changed. It's Dr. Patel. I should... She stepped into the hallway. Hello? Yes, this is Grace. Daniel could hear only her side of the conversation, but her voice grew increasingly strained. More severe? I don't understand, you said. Maggie looked at Daniel worried. He reached over, squeezed her hand. How much? Grace's voice cracked. Thousands? But I already, no, I understand, yes. Thank you for calling. She returned to the kitchen, phone clutched in her hand. Her face had gone pale. Everything okay? Daniel asked, though clearly it wasn't. Grace sank into her chair. The X-rays. They showed something they missed before. Buddy's hip is worse than they thought. Without additional surgery, he might... She stopped, glancing at Maggie. He needs another operation, a specialist. Dr. Patel says it could be $3,000, maybe more. The number hung in the air like smoke. But he'll be okay, right? Maggie's voice was small. Grace's smile was forced. Of course, sweetie. Daniel knew that smile. He'd worn it himself when the hospital bills came after Sarah died, when the mortgage was late, when he'd had to choose between new school shoes for Maggie or keeping the electricity on. Insurance? Pet insurance doesn't cover pre-existing conditions, and this counts because of his age. Grace pushed eggs around her plate. I'll figure something out. Sell Mom's jewelry, maybe, or ... quote. She didn't finish. They all knew there probably wasn't an or. The rest of breakfast passed in uncomfortable silence. Maggie kept glancing between the adults, smart enough to sense the shift but not understanding it fully. When they finished, Daniel helped clear plates while Grace walked them to the door. Thank you again, she said, for everything. If there's anything, we'll be fine. That pride again, brittle as old glass. In the truck, Maggie was quiet until they reached the main road. Is Buddy going to die? No, sweetheart. But Miss Grace looked so sad. Sometimes grown-up problems are complicated. Because of money? Daniel glanced at his daughter, too smart for her own good. Yeah, because of money. That night, after Maggie was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table. Bills spread before him like accusations. Electric, water, Mortgage, Maggie's school supplies, his truck payment, already 2 months behind. His paycheck stretched thinner each month, no matter how many extra shifts he picked up. His phone sat beside the pile. Grace had written her number on a clinic receipt. He could call, offer to help somehow. But with what? His savings account held exactly $87. He thought about Grace's face when Dr. Patel called, the way her shoulders had dropped, the tremor in her voice when she'd said, "I can't lose Buddy. He's all I have left." Daniel understood that feeling. After Sarah died, Maggie had been his anchor, the one thing that kept him from drowning. Buddy was Grace's anchor now. He gathered the bills into a pile, set them aside. Tomorrow he'd figure something out. He always did. But tonight, he couldn't shake the image of Grace standing in her doorway, trying so hard to hold it together. Just like him. The morning sun cut through Daniel's kitchen window, painting gold stripes across the worn linoleum. Maggie pushed her cereal around the bowl, not eating. "You thinking about Buddy?" She nodded. "Can we see him today?" "It's Saturday. You don't have school, but—" "Please, Daddy." Her eyes, Sarah's eyes, looked up at him. "He needs friends." When Mommy was sick, having visitors made her smile. The comparison hit like cold water. Daniel set down his coffee cup. "All right, but just a quick visit." Maggie jumped up, cereal forgotten, and ran to get her jacket. The veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and wet fur. Through the lobby window, Daniel spotted Grace in the recovery area, hunched forward on a plastic chair beside a large kennel. She wore the same clothes from yesterday. "Miss Grace!" Maggie called out, pushing through the door. Grace looked up, dark circles under her eyes. "Maggie, Daniel, I didn't expect—" "We wanted to check on Buddy." Daniel noticed the untouched coffee cup beside her chair, cold and forgotten. "Have you been here all night?" "I went home for a bit. Couldn't sleep." Grace turned back to the kennel where Buddy lay on his side, breathing shallow but steady. "Dr. Patel says he's stable, but without the surgery." Maggie dropped to her knees beside the kennel, pressing her small hand against the wire. "Hi, Buddy." "It's me, Maggie. Remember?" Buddy's eyes opened. His tail moved. Not quite a wag, more like a tired acknowledgement, but movement nonetheless. "Look, he remembers me." Grace covered her mouth, tears threatening. "He hasn't responded to anyone else like that. Not even me this morning." Maggie started whispering to Buddy, her voice too low for the adults to catch. Daniel watched his daughter, remembering how she'd done the same thing at Sarah's bedside. Children had their own language for healing, he supposed. "I called 3 banks this morning." Grace's voice was flat. "Credits shot from the divorce. My ex destroyed my finances along with everything else. I even called my sister in Colorado, but she's barely making it herself. What about a payment plan?" "Dr. Patel already gave me one for the first surgery. He can't extend more credit." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "God, I sound pathetic. I'm 43 years old and I can't even save my dog." "You're not pathetic. You're in a tough spot." "A tough spot." She laughed, bitter and short. "That's one way to put it." Buddy's tail moved again. Maggie was telling him about her school, about Mrs. Lawson's cat, about anything and everything. The golden retriever's breathing seemed steadier, his eyes more focused. $3,000. Grace spoke to the air. "Might as well be 3 million." Daniel thought about his kitchen table, the bills stacked like a house of cards. His truck needed new tires before winter. Maggie needed a winter coat. She'd outgrown last year's. But watching Grace crumble, watching his daughter pour love into that kennel, something shifted in his chest. "We'll figure it out." Grace looked at him sharply. "We?" "Yeah, we." "Daniel, you don't even know me. You can't—" "I know enough." He kept his voice steady. "I know you love that dog. I know he's keeping you afloat. I know what that feels like. You can't afford this any more than I can." She was right. But being right didn't change anything. Maybe not alone, but together with help. "What help? I don't have anyone." Maggie looked up from the kennel. The church could help. Both adults turned to her. They always help when someone's in trouble. Remember when Mrs. Patterson's house had that fire? Everyone pitched in. Daniel's memory stirred. After Sarah's diagnosis, the church had organized meal trains, driven Maggie to school, even helped with some medical bills. He'd forgotten, or maybe forced himself to forget. Taking charity had burned like acid in his throat. I couldn't. Grace shook her head. I don't even go to church. Haven't since the divorce. Doesn't matter. They help the Nguyen's when their store flooded, and they're Buddhist. It's different. I'm not... Grace stopped. I can't ask strangers for money. Daniel recognized the wall she was building. Same one he'd built. After Sarah got sick, I tried to handle everything myself. Nearly lost the house. Know what Pastor Jim told me? He paused, making sure Grace was listening. He said, sometimes letting people help is the bravest thing we can do. That's different. You had a dying wife. And you have a dying dog who's the only family you've got left. The words hung between them, maybe too harsh, but true. Buddy whimpered softly. Maggie resumed her whispering, her small fingers poking through the kennel wire to touch his fur. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't know how to ask. We'll figure it out. Together. That word again. Together. Grace stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Why do you care so much? Daniel watched his daughter with the dog, saw the purpose in her movements, the careful tenderness she'd learned too young. Because Maggie's right. People help when someone's in trouble, and because... He hesitated. Because I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning. Grace's composure finally cracked. Tears ran down her face as she watched Buddy struggle to lift his head toward Maggie's voice. From the kennel came a sound, weak but unmistakable. Buddy barked, once soft and hoarse, but a bark nonetheless. He's fighting, Maggie announced. He wants to get better. Grace wiped her face with her sleeve. Okay. Okay? The church. We'll ask. She looked at Daniel. But you're coming with me. I can't do it alone. Wouldn't dream of letting you. They gathered their things, Maggie promising Buddy she'd be back soon. As they walked toward the exit, his weak bark followed them. Not goodbye, but a promise. The afternoon sun waited outside, and with it, the faint outline of hope. Daniel pushed the mop across the high school hallway, his movements automatic after years of practice. The smell of pine cleaner filled his nostrils, but his mind was elsewhere, $3,000. The number circled his thoughts like a buzzard. The morning bell rang, and teenagers flooded the corridor. They stepped around his wet floor signs without looking at him, invisible as always. Usually he preferred it that way. Today, though, he found himself studying their careless energy, remembering when Maggie used to run everywhere, too, before Sarah got sick. By lunch, he'd scrubbed 3 bathrooms and stripped wax from the science wing, but Grace's face kept appearing in his mind. The way she'd crumbled at the clinic, the way she'd said okay, like jumping off a cliff. His phone buzzed. Mrs. Lawson. Maggie's fine. Teaching her to knit. Don't worry. He wasn't worried about Maggie. Not exactly. The afternoon dragged. He fixed a jammed locker, replaced fluorescent tubes in the library, unclogged a sink in the teacher's lounge. Normal problems with normal solutions. Not like a dying dog and a woman with empty pockets and too much pride. When his shift ended, he found Maggie at Mrs. Lawson's kitchen table, yarn tangled around her fingers. "Can we visit, Buddy?" I was thinking the same thing. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to Grace's farmhouse. The place looked worse in daylight. Peeling paint, sagging gutters, a porch that had seen better decades. Grace appeared at the door before they'd even knocked, Buddy limping beside her on a makeshift sling. "Daniel?" I wasn't expecting. Maggie wanted to see Buddy. His daughter was already kneeling, examining the dog's bandages with serious concentration. "He's walking better," Maggie announced. "Can I take him around the yard?" "Real slow?" Grace handed over the leash. Stay where I can see you." They watched Maggie guide Buddy toward a patch of dandelions, the dog's tail wagging despite his limp. "She's good with him. She's good with everything broken." The words came out wrong, too raw, but Grace just nodded. The porch door creaked and swung crooked. Daniel tested the hinge. "Got a screwdriver?" "In the kitchen, maybe. Or the barn. Things tend to migrate around here." She returned with a rusty Phillips head and a handful of mismatched screws. He set to work, aware of her watching. "I keep meaning to fix things. There's a list somewhere, probably using it as a bookmark. These old houses, something's always breaking. Richard, my ex, he hired people for everything. I never learned." She paused. "That sounds spoiled." "Sounds normal." He tightened the last screw. The door swung smooth and quiet. "I should pay you." "Stop!" They stood on the porch, watching Maggie show Buddy a caterpillar she'd found. The afternoon light made everything look softer, even the neglected yard. "I called Pastor Hill this morning." Daniel looked at her, surprised, then lost my nerve and hung up twice. "It's hard. It's humiliating. Hi, I'm the woman who hasn't darkened your doorstep in 2 years. Can you help me pay for dog surgery?" She laughed without humor. "They probably don't even remember me. They remember everyone. That's what I'm afraid of." Maggie ran back, breathless. "Buddy peed. That's good, right? Means his insides are working." Grace actually smiled. "Yes, that's very good. We should tell Pastor Hill. Daddy says we can ask him for help at church." The words tumbled out before Daniel could stop them. Grace's smile vanished. "Maggie, why don't you walk Buddy to the big oak tree?" When she was out of earshot, Grace turned to him. "You told her we're going to church?" "I mentioned it might be an option." "Daniel, look, we don't have to." But Maggie's right. Pastor Hill, he's not like he doesn't judge. When Sarah was dying, I was angry at God, at everyone. Stopped going to services. Pastor Hill still showed up every week with groceries. Never preached, never pushed, just helped. Grace wrapped her arms around herself. "I haven't been inside a church since Richard told the whole congregation I was difficult to live with." The admission hung between them. Different church, different people. Same small town. Same small town that loves comeback stories. She studied him. "You really think they'd help?" "I know they would." The sun was sinking lower, painting the farmhouse gold. Maggie and Buddy had made it to the oak tree and back, both moving carefully. "Tonight?" "If you're ready." "I'll never be ready," she called to Maggie. "How's Buddy doing?" "He's tired but happy." Grace looked at Daniel. "Okay, tonight." They drove in Daniel's truck, Grace in the passenger seat, Maggie in the back, humming to herself. The church parking lot held a handful of cars. Wednesday evening Bible study. Daniel recognized most of them. Pastor Hill met them in his office, a small room that smelled like coffee and old books. He was younger than most expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Daniel, good to see you. And this must be Maggie. You've grown since Christmas service." "This is Grace Whitfield." She. "I know Grace." Pastor Hill smiled warmly. "Your mother used to bring the most amazing apple pie to potlucks." "You remember that?" "Mrs. Eleanor's pie?" Impossible to forget. The tension in Grace's shoulders eased slightly. They told him about Buddy, about the surgery, about the cost. Pastor Hill listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. "A therapy dog," he said finally. "That's a working dog. That's family." "He's all I have left," Grace admitted. "Well, that's not entirely true anymore, is it?" He glanced at Daniel and Maggie. "Seems to me you've got some friends in your corner." He pulled out a calendar. "What if we organized a dinner? Nothing fancy. Spaghetti, salad, bread. This Saturday." "Called it a community supper," suggested Donation. "I'll make some calls. Get the word out." "People would come?" Grace's voice was small. "People love a good cause, and they love dogs." He smiled. Plus, Mrs. Patterson's been itching to use the new church kitchen. Grace's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to thank you. No thanks needed. This is what we do. As they left, Grace stopped Daniel in the parking lot, Maggie already climbing into the truck. I don't know how to thank you either. You just did. Thursday morning brought chaos to the church basement. Mrs. Patterson commanded the kitchen like a general, pointing her wooden spoon at volunteers. Those tables need cloths. And someone can check we have enough plates. Paper ones, mind you. I'm not washing 200 dishes. Daniel carried folding chairs from storage while Grace counted napkins. Maggie sat at a corner table, tongue poking out in concentration as she drew another Buddy poster. How many is that now? Daniel asked, setting down chairs. 17. Mrs. Lawson's helping me color them. Pastor Hill appeared with a box of donated pasta. Miller's grocery came through, 20 pounds of spaghetti. 20 pounds? Grace's eyes widened. This town likes to eat. They worked through lunch, Grace beside Daniel as they tested the ancient coffee urns. Her sleeve brushed his arm when she reached for filters. Neither moved away. Your daughter's remarkable. She gets it from her mother. I doubt that's the only place. Before he could respond, Maggie bounded over with her latest creation, Buddy wearing a superhero cape. Think people will like it? They'll love it, Grace said, her voice thick. That afternoon they drove around town posting flyers. Maggie insisted on taping them at child height so kids can see. The diner, the hardware store, the post office, everywhere they went, people asked about the injured dog. Heard about your retriever, old Jim said at the barber shop. Count me in for Saturday. By evening, Daniel's back ached from hauling supplies, but watching Grace smile at each promise of attendance made it worthwhile. Friday brought pie making. The church kitchen smelled like cinnamon and apples as Grace taught Daniel her mother's recipe. The secret's in the butter temperature, she explained, her hands working dough with practiced ease. Too warm, and it's tough. Too cold, and it won't hold. Daniel's attempt looked like abstract art. Here! She moved behind him, guiding his hands. Gentle. Like this. Her breath tickled his ear. The kitchen suddenly felt too warm. Daddy, you're doing it wrong. Maggie called from her perch on a stool where she was supposedly doing homework. Story of my life. Grace laughed. A real laugh, not the careful ones she'd been rationing out. Daniel hadn't heard anything that lovely in years. They made 12 pies that afternoon. Apple, cherry, pecan. Grace's hands moved with confidence here, different from the uncertain woman he'd met at the clinic. You could sell these, he said, watching her crimp perfect edges. I used to. Before. She didn't elaborate. Mrs. Lawson collected Maggie at 6 for a sleepover with her granddaughter. The kitchen grew quiet without her chatter. I should show you something, Grace said suddenly. They drove to her farmhouse. Buddy lifted his head from his bed, tail thumping weakly. Grace disappeared into a back room, returning with a folder, his certificates. Daniel flipped through them. Canine Good Citizen. Therapy Dog International. Photos of Buddy with elderly people. Children in hospitals. After Richard left, I'd have panic attacks, couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. The counselor suggested a therapy dog. She sat on the worn couch, Daniel beside her. Buddy limped over, resting his head on Daniel's knee. He knew when they were coming, would press against me, force me to focus on his breathing instead of mine. Saved my life, honestly. He's still saving it. Different kind of saving now. She scratched behind Buddy's ears. Richard thought it was ridiculous. A grown woman needing a dog to function. Richard sounds like an ass. The profanity surprised them both. Grace laughed, covering her mouth. Sorry. Don't be. He was. Buddy nudged Daniel's hand, demanding attention. His tail wagged despite the cone around his neck, despite the bandages. He likes you. Smart dog. Terrible judge of character, actually. Loved Richard right until the end. Maybe he's learned. They sat quietly, Buddy's breathing the only sound. The farmhouse felt different with Daniel in it, less empty, less broken. "I haven't felt this normal in months," Grace admitted. "This is normal?" "You know what I mean." He did. The easy silence, the shared purpose, the simple presence of another adult who understood loss. "Sarah would have liked you." The words surprised him. He never talked about Sarah with anyone except Maggie. "You think?" She had a thing about people who were kind to animals, said it showed their real character. What else did she say? So he told her about Sarah's terrible cooking but beautiful singing, her obsession with crossword puzzles, the way she'd narrate their life like a nature documentary when Maggie was a baby. Grace laughed at the stories, asked questions, shared her own memories of marriage before it soured. They talked until Buddy needed his medication, until the coffee grew cold, until Daniel noticed it was past 10. "I should go." "Thank you for everything." At the door she touched his arm. "Daniel, tomorrow, after the fundraiser, whatever happens, whether we raise enough or not, this week has been—" "I know." He drove home through empty streets, radio off, windows down despite the cold. His face hurt from smiling. When had he started smiling? The house felt too quiet without Maggie, but for once the loneliness didn't sting. He could still smell pie crust on his clothes, still feel where Grace's hands had guided his. For the first time in 3 years, Daniel Harris went to bed without checking Sarah's picture on the nightstand. Not because he'd forgotten her, but because the ache had shifted, just slightly, from pain to memory. Saturday would come with its own challenges, but tonight he allowed himself this small victory. He'd smiled today, really smiled, and meant it. The church hall glowed like something from a dream. String lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting warm shadows over mismatched tablecloths and borrowed folding chairs. The smell hit first. Pot roast and cornbread, apple pie and coffee, a dozen casseroles whose recipes had been passed down through generations. Daniel straightened his tie for the 3rd time, his only tie saved for funerals and job interviews. "Stop fidgeting," Mrs. Lawson scolded, adjusting the donation jar on the welcome table. "You look fine." He didn't feel fine. His stomach churned like he'd swallowed a live fish. People arrived in waves. The Hendersons from 2 streets over, Betty from the diner with her famous coleslaw, Coach Williams from the high school clapping Daniel on the shoulder. Even Dr. Patel showed up, still in scrubs. "Didn't expect this many," Grace whispered beside him. She'd worn a blue dress the first time he'd seen her in anything but jeans. Her hands shook slightly as she greeted each neighbor. "Small towns show up," Pastor Hill said, beaming. "Always have." The hall filled quickly. Conversations bounced off the walls. Talk of harvest schedules and grandchildren, the upcoming winter, whether the Packers had any chance this season. Normal talk, but underneath it ran a current of purpose. Everyone knew why they were here. Maggie darted between tables in her Sunday dress. The yellow one Sarah had bought 2 sizes too big so she'd grow into it. She'd grown into it perfectly. Dinner was served family style, plates passing hand to hand. Daniel picked at his food, watching Grace try to eat while fielding questions about Buddy. The golden retriever himself lay on a blanket near the stage, cone removed for the evening, tail wagging at every visitor. After pie, but before coffee, Pastor Hill stood. "We all know why we're here." Sometimes a community is measured not by its size, but by its heart. Tonight, we're here for Grace, for Buddy, and for what they represent: second chances, healing, and the bonds that make us human. Applause rippled through the hall. People began standing, walking to the donation jar. $5, $10, $20. Mr. Chen from the hardware store wrote a check. The teenage Peterson twins dumped their babysitting money in quarters. Then Maggie tugged Daniel's sleeve. "Now? You don't have to, sweetheart. I want to." She walked to the stage like she was approaching a sleeping bear. The microphone looked enormous in her small hands. The room quieted. forks settling on plates. Hi." Her voice cracked. Daniel started to stand, but Grace's hand found his wrist. "I wanted to sing something for my mom and for Buddy." She cleared her throat. The first notes came out whispered, barely there. "Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound." Her voice gained strength with each word. Not perfect. She missed a note here and there, but pure, real. Sarah's voice had been like that, untrained but honest. That saved a wretch like me. The hall had gone church quiet. Mrs. Henderson dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "I once was lost, but now am found." Maggie's eyes found Daniel's across the room. "Was blind, but now I see." The last note hung in the air like a prayer. For 3 heartbeats nobody moved. Then the applause crashed over them like a wave. People stood, whistling and cheering. Maggie's face turned pink as she scrambled off stage into Daniel's arms. "Did I do okay?" "Perfect, baby. Perfect." Grace's hand found his under the table, squeezing tight. Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. Around them, people surged toward the donation jar. Bills appeared from wallets that Daniel knew couldn't spare them. The jar filled, then overflowed. Betty from the diner started counting, her lips moving silently. Coach Williams helped sort checks from cash. The number grew, 100, 500, 1,000. $2,347, Betty announced, and 63 cents. The surgery cost $3,000. They were close, so close. Dr. Patel stood. "I'll discount my fees. That should cover the rest." Fresh applause. Grace finally let the tears fall, covering her face with both hands. Neighbors surrounded her, hugs and backpats and promises of continued support. Daniel needed air. The joy was suffocating, too much like the happiness he'd lost. He slipped out the side door into the parking lot. October air bit at his lungs. He loosened his tie, breathing deep. The stars were out, clear and cold. The door opened behind him, Grace wrapping her arms around herself against the chill. "You okay?" "Just needed a minute." She stood beside him close enough that he could smell her shampoo. Lavender, maybe? "Daniel, I don't know how to—" "Don't. No, I need to say this. You saved us. Not just Buddy, but me. I was drowning, and you threw me a rope. Anyone would have—" "No, they wouldn't. They didn't." She turned to face him. In the light from the hall windows, her eyes looked like deep water. "You're a good man, Daniel Harris." They stood there, inches apart. The moment stretched like taffy. He could kiss her, should kiss her. Sarah would want ... Buddy's bark cut through the night, urgent and demanding. "He probably needs his medication," Grace said, stepping back. "Right, of course." They returned to the hall separately, carefully. The party was winding down, neighbors collecting empty casserole dishes and folding tables. Daniel watched Grace load Buddy into her car, helped secure him in the back seat. She touched his hand once more, just fingertips against his palm. "See you tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." He stood in the parking lot as taillights disappeared into darkness, his heart doing something between hoping and hurting. Inside the hall, Maggie helped stack chairs, humming her mother's song. Daniel woke before his alarm, darkness still pressed against the windows. 4:30. His mind had been churning all night, calculating and recalculating numbers that refused to add up right. He made coffee in the quiet kitchen, then drove to the church through empty streets. Pastor Hill's office light was already on. The man kept farmer's hours despite never having farmed a day in his life. "Couldn't sleep either?" Pastor Hill asked, looking up from his ledger. "Need to know where we stand?" They counted together. Bills spread across the desk like fallen leaves. 2,300 from the dinner. Another 200 had trickled in overnight, left in the church donation box. 2,500 total. Pastor Hill removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. "Still need 500 for the full surgery cost. I'll cover it." "Daniel?" "I said I'll cover it." The pastor studied him. "Your truck was making quite a racket last night." "It's fine." Don't lie to a man of God, son. Daniel's jaw tightened. The truck needed new brake lines, probably a transmission rebuild. He'd been nursing it along for months, but it was living on borrowed time. Buddy needs that surgery. And Maggie needs a father who can get to work. I'll manage. Pastor Hill sighed, but didn't argue further. They locked the money in the church safe, and Daniel headed to the high school for his morning shift. By lunch, his pledge was weighing on him like wet concrete. But when Grace called, voice bright with hope, he pushed doubt aside. Can you meet at the clinic at 3? Dr. Patel wants to go over everything before Monday's surgery. I'll be there. The truck coughed when he started it after work. A grinding noise joined the symphony when he turned left toward the clinic. He parked carefully, hoping Grace wouldn't notice the oil spot he left behind. Inside, Dr. Patel walked them through the procedure, pins in Buddy's leg, repair of torn ligaments, monitoring for infection. Buddy watched from his kennel, tail thumping despite the cone around his neck. Payment is due Monday morning, Dr. Patel said gently. $3,000 total. We'll have it, Daniel said. Grace squeezed his hand, eyes shining. We actually did it. They left together, Grace practically floating. Daniel's truck waited in the parking lot like a guilty secret. Want to grab coffee? Grace asked. My treat to celebrate? Rain check? Need to pick up Maggie? Of course, Daniel. Thank you for everything. The truck started on the third try. Grace frowned at the sound but said nothing. Daniel pulled out carefully, babying the accelerator. 2 miles from home, the grinding became a shriek, then a bang like a gunshot. The truck lurched sideways. Daniel wrestled it to the shoulder as the engine died. Smoke leaked from under the hood. He popped it, stepped back from the wave of heat. Transmission fluid pooled beneath the chassis, dark as blood. The tow truck took 40 minutes. The driver, Jim Bradley from high school, whistled low at the damage. Transmission's shot. Brake lines are gone too. Looking at $2,500, minimum. $2,500, the exact amount in the church safe. Can you get me home? Sure, Danny, but this thing ain't going nowhere without major work. They rode in silence, Daniel's truck swaying on the lift behind them. Maggie was waiting on the porch with Mrs. Lawson, homework spread across her lap. Where's our truck? Needs some fixing. She studied his face with those Sarah eyes, seeing everything he tried to hide. After dinner, mac and cheese from a box, all he could manage, Maggie helped clear dishes without being asked. We'll figure it out, Daddy. What? Whatever's wrong. We always do. She hugged him, fierce and quick, then headed to finish homework. Daniel stood at the sink, dishes forgotten, watching darkness claim the backyard. His phone rang. Grace. Daniel, Dr. Patel just called. Monday at 8 a.m. Buddy's surgery is officially scheduled. Can you believe it? That's wonderful. You don't sound... Are you okay? Just tired. Long day. Well, rest up. Monday's going to be amazing. We're saving him, Daniel. We're actually saving him. Yeah, we are. After hanging up, he sat at the kitchen table. Bills fanned out like accusations. Electric, water, Maggie's school supplies, the mortgage, always the mortgage. Without the truck, he couldn't get to work. Without work, these bills became mountains. But he'd promised Grace, promised Buddy, promised his daughter they'd help. His hands folded without thinking, knuckles white with pressure. Lord, please show me what to do. The words came out cracked, desperate, like Maggie's voice starting that hymn, uncertain but needing to be heard. The refrigerator hummed. A dog barked somewhere distant. No lightning bolt of clarity came, no voice from above, just silence and the weight of impossible choices. His phone lit up with a text from Grace. A photo of Buddy, tail mid-wag despite the cone. He knows something good is coming. Thank you for giving him hope. Daniel stared at the screen until it went dark, his whispered prayer still hanging in the air like smoke. 2 days crawled by. Daniel walked everywhere now, to the school for his shifts, to the grocery store, back home, Monday morning loomed with its impossible choice: Buddy's surgery or fixing the truck that kept them fed. "Why are we walking again?" Maggie asked, adjusting her backpack straps. "Good exercise." "Your truck's really broken, isn't it?" He couldn't lie to those eyes. "Yeah, baby, it is. We'll still help Buddy, though, right?" Before he could answer, Mrs. Chen from 2 streets over came running, still in her housecoat. "Danny, that woman with the dog, Grace, she needs help. Some man in a fancy car." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Watch Maggie." "But Daddy—" "Stay with Mrs. Chen. I'll be right back." He ran. 3 blocks had never felt longer. The black SUV gleamed in Grace's dirt driveway like oil on water. Through the screen door, voices carried, one smooth and contemptuous, the other shaking with fury. Daniel didn't knock. Rick Whitfield looked exactly like his voice sounded. Pressed suit, $100 haircut, smile sharp as broken glass. Grace stood backed against her kitchen counter, arms crossed tight over her chest. "Signed the papers, but we both know Buddy was purchased during the marriage. That makes him marital property." "Get out," Grace's voice cracked. "Or what? You'll call that janitor you've been playing house with?" Rick noticed Daniel then, his smile widening. "Speaking of which—" Daniel moved between them, feeling Rick catalog his work boots, his faded jeans, the calluses on his hands. "You need to leave. And you need to mind your own business." Rick's cologne was thick enough to taste. "This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," Grace said. "Semantics. The dog comes with me, or I'll have my lawyer explain Minnesota property law to a judge. Your choice." "Buddy's not property." Daniel kept his voice level, though his fists ached to curl. "He's her family." Rick laughed, a sound like ice cracking. "Family? A dog? How precious. Tell me, what's your expert legal opinion worth? Minimum wage, maybe $1 over?" Heat crawled up Daniel's neck. "More than whatever you paid for your conscience." Rick's smile flickered. "Careful, janitor. I could buy and sell you 10 times over. I could make one phone call and have you fired before lunch. Try it." They stood close enough that Daniel could see the small scar above Rick's left eyebrow, could smell the mint on his breath. "This isn't over," Rick said finally, stepping back. "Monday morning, my lawyer will file an emergency injunction. That mutt won't be going anywhere near an operating table." He brushed past Daniel, paused at the door. "Nice farmhouse, Grace. Shame about the roof. And the foundation. And, well, everything, really. Guess that's what happens when you choose pride over common sense." The SUV's engine purred to life. Gravel sprayed as Rick accelerated, leaving silence thick as morning fog. Grace's knees gave out. Daniel caught her, guided her to a kitchen chair. Her whole body shook, anger or fear or both. "He can't take Buddy. He can't. He won't. You don't know him. He has money, lawyers. He destroyed me in the divorce, and he'll do it again just because he can. Grace, I never should have fought him. Should have just disappeared, started over somewhere. He couldn't find us." "Stop." Daniel knelt beside her chair. "You're not running, and you're not facing this alone." She looked at him then, really looked, tears cutting tracks down her cheeks. "Why do you care so much?" The question hung between them. Daniel had no simple answer, just the truth that Grace and Buddy, and even this broken-down farmhouse, had become necessary to him somehow, essential as breathing. Because that's what people do. They help each other. That evening, Maggie's homework was spread across Grace's kitchen table between mugs of cocoa. Daniel had collected her after school, explained about Rick's visit in terms a 10-year-old could grasp. A mean man trying to take Buddy away. "But he can't," Maggie had said indignant. "Buddy loves Miss Grace." Now she worked through long division while Grace helped, patient with every mistake. Buddy lay stretched beneath the table, his cone-bumping chair legs when he shifted. The scene was so domestic, so right, that Daniel's chest ached watching it. "I haven't felt safe in years," Grace said quietly, not looking up from Maggie's worksheet. Not since long before the divorce. Maybe not since Mom got sick. Daniel waited. But that morning you brought Buddy to the clinic. I don't know, something shifted, like maybe the world wasn't quite as cold as I'd thought. Maggie yawned enormously, rubbing her eyes. Can we stay a little longer? It's getting late, baby. Please? Grace's hand found Maggie's shoulder gentle. You can come back tomorrow. Buddy will be waiting. Maggie leaned into Grace's side, natural as breathing. Buddy lifted his head, resting it on Grace's lap with a contented sigh. The moment was perfect crystal, fragile and precious and temporary. Daniel wanted to promise more than tomorrow. Wanted to say he'd stand between Grace and any threat, between Buddy and harm, between fear and this fragile peace they'd built. Instead, he gathered Maggie's books, helped Grace clear the mugs, ordinary actions that meant everything and nothing. Walking home under stars sharp as winter, Maggie asleep on his shoulder, Daniel made his vow to the darkness. I'll protect them. Whatever it takes, the words were a prayer and a promise, cast into the night like seeds, hoping something stronger would grow. The ceiling had 47 cracks. Daniel knew because he'd counted them 3 times since midnight. Sleep was a stranger tonight, chased away by Rick's threats and Grace's tears and the weight of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. His old alarm clock ticked steady as a heartbeat. Outside, October wind rattled the gutters he'd meant to fix last spring. Everything needed fixing, the house, the truck, maybe him too. Small feet padded down the hallway. Maggie appeared in his doorway, clutching the teddy bear her mother had given her years ago. In the darkness, she looked smaller than 10, fragile as bird bones. Daddy? Come here, baby. She climbed onto the bed, curling against his side. The bear's button eyes caught moonlight through the window. You won't let them take Buddy, right? The question sat heavy on his chest. Daniel pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. I'll do everything I can. That's not a promise. His voice cracked. Maggie, you promised we'd help. You said Buddy was family now. I know. So why does your voice sound scared? How did you explain legal systems to a 10-year-old? How did you say that sometimes bad people won because they had better lawyers? That money talked louder than love? I'm not scared, just thinking hard about how to help. She was quiet long enough that he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, Mom would know what to do. The words were soft, matter-of-fact, but they hollowed him out. 3 years since Emily died, and Maggie rarely mentioned her anymore. When she did, it always caught him unprepared. Yeah, she would. They lay there until Maggie's breathing deepened. Daniel carried her back to her room, tucked the bear under her arm, watched her face smooth into sleep's peace. Morning came gray and reluctant. Daniel dropped Maggie at Mrs. Lawson's and drove to Grace's farmhouse. She answered the door, looking like she hadn't slept either, shadows under her eyes dark as bruises. I made coffee. They sat at her kitchen table while Buddy dozed in his bed, occasional whimpers escaping as he dreamed. Grace's hands shook around her mug. I had nightmares. Rick showing up with police, taking Buddy while I screamed. That won't happen. You can't know that. She set the mug down hard, coffee sloshing. You don't know what he's capable of. During the divorce, he had private investigators following me, had my bank accounts frozen, made me look crazy in court. Grace, I should cancel the surgery. The words hung between them like a blade. What? It's not worth it. Not if it puts you and Maggie at risk. Rick's vindictive. He'll come after anyone who helps me. You can't be serious. I am. She stood, pacing to the window. I've been selfish, letting you get involved. You have Maggie to think about, a job, a life. You don't need my problems. Daniel crossed to her, turned her gently to face him. Stop. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protecting. Everyone needs protecting from Rick. Her voice broke. He destroys everything he touches. I won't let him destroy you too. The whole town's behind you. Pastor Hill, the church, everyone who came to the fundraiser, they don't know him like I do. Maybe not. But they know you, and they know what's right." She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. Right doesn't matter in court. Money matters. Lawyers matter. From the doorway, a small voice exploded. "Daddy, you always told me love means fighting for someone." They both turned. Maggie stood there, fists clenched, face fierce with 10-year-old fury. "Why aren't you fighting for her?" The words hit Daniel like cold water. His daughter stared at him, waiting, expecting him to be the father who'd taught her about courage and standing up for others. "Maggie, no, you said love means not giving up. You said Mom never gave up, even when she was sick. This is different." "No, it's not." Tears ran down her face now. "Miss Grace is scared, and Buddy's hurt, and you're supposed to help. That's what you do. You help." She ran from the room. They heard the front door slam. Daniel found her by the old oak tree in Grace's yard, knees pulled to her chest. He sat beside her in the cold grass, waiting. "I'm sorry I yelled." "Don't be. You were right." She looked up at him. "Really?" "Really. Sometimes Daddy forgets his own lessons." "So you'll fight?" "For Miss Grace and Buddy?" "With everything I've got." That evening, after dinner and homework and Maggie's bath, Daniel drove to Riverside Cemetery. Emily's headstone stood simple and clean. Beloved wife and mother. He knelt in the damp grass, hands clasped. "I need your strength, Em. There's this woman and her dog, and Maggie loves them both. I think I do too. But there's a man trying to hurt them, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to stop him." Wind stirred the oak leaves overhead. Somewhere a night bird called. "Help me protect them. Help me be the man you always believed I was." He stayed until the cemetery gates were about to close, drawing courage from the silence and the memory of Emily's faith in him. Back in town, he stopped at the church. The doors stood open, spilling warm light into the darkness. Daniel stood on the threshold, looking in at the empty pews, the simple cross, the place where the community had rallied around Grace. Tomorrow he would fight. With whatever weapons he had, faith, community, pure stubborn love. Tonight he simply stood in the doorway, letting that resolve settle into his bones like iron. The diner on Main Street hadn't changed since Daniel's high school days. Same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee that could strip paint. Mark sat in the corner booth, broad shoulders filling out a flannel shirt, hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "Been too long, brother." They clasped hands across the table, the grip firm and familiar. "Thanks for coming." "You kidding? After what you did for me in Kandahar?" Mark signaled the waitress for another coffee. "Besides, I looked into this Rick Whitfield. Real piece of work." "You found something?" "Better. Found nothing." Mark pulled out a folder. "No legal claim to the dog whatsoever. Divorce decrees clear. All pets went to Grace. But here's the kicker." He tapped a document. "Buddy's registered as a certified therapy animal, under Grace's name only, post-divorce." Daniel's shoulders loosened for the first time in days. That means Rick's blowing smoke. He touches that dog, it's theft. Maybe worse, considering Buddy's medical designation. Mark leaned back. "The Veterans Legal Aid Group I work with? We've got lawyers who eat guys like Rick for breakfast, pro bono. Mark, I can't ask." "You're not asking. I'm offering. This is what we do. Help our own." Daniel stared at the papers, hope blooming in his chest. "Grace needs to see this." "Then let's go show her." They drove to Grace's farmhouse together. She answered the door with flour in her hair, Maggie visible behind her wearing an apron 3 sizes too big. "We're making cookies for Buddy." Grace's eyes moved between Daniel and Mark, questioning. "This is Mark?" "My army buddy. He's got news." They gathered at the kitchen table while Maggie fed Buddy tiny pieces of cookie dough. whispering conspiracies about keeping it secret from the adults. Mark spread the documents out, explaining each one in simple terms. Grace's hands trembled as she read. "He really can't take Buddy?" "Not legally. These papers prove it." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank Daniel. He's the one who called in the cavalry." After Mark left, they drove to the church. Pastor Hill welcomed them into his office, listening carefully as Daniel explained the legal situation. "This is good news, but we should prepare for Rick to escalate anyway." The pastor steepled his fingers. "Men like him don't accept defeat easily." "What do you suggest?" "Community witness. Make it clear Grace isn't alone. If he shows up again, half the town will be watching." Pastor Hill smiled. Amazing how bullies shrink when faced with unified opposition. "Like David and Goliath," Maggie piped up from where she sat with Buddy. "Exactly like that." They spent the afternoon organizing. Pastor Hill made calls while Daniel and Grace compiled witness statements from the fundraiser attendees. People eager to testify about Grace's character, about Buddy's importance to her recovery. By evening, exhaustion weighed on all of them. Back at Grace's farmhouse, she surveyed her nearly empty pantry. "Stay for dinner?" "It's just stew, but—" "Stew sounds perfect." They worked together in the kitchen, Daniel chopping vegetables while Grace stirred the pot. Maggie set the table with careful precision, giving Buddy a running commentary on proper placement of forks and spoons. "Buddy says spoons should go on the left." "Buddy's wrong," Daniel called out. "Spoons go on the right." "Maybe Buddy's left pawed," Grace suggested, and Maggie dissolved into giggles. The stew was simple, beef, potatoes, carrots, but sitting around Grace's table it tasted like a feast. Maggie entertained them with stories from school, doing impressions of her teacher that had Grace laughing until she cried. "And then Buddy ate all the crumbs under Tommy's desk," Maggie announced, though Buddy had been nowhere near her school. "He's like the world's best vacuum cleaner." "A vacuum who needs surgery," Grace reminded gently, "but he'll get it. Daddy fixed everything." Daniel caught Grace's eye across the table. She looked at him with something soft and wondering, then glanced away, color rising in her cheeks. After dinner, Maggie insisted on helping with dishes, standing on a step stool at the sink. Daniel dried while Grace put away, their movements falling into easy rhythm. Through the window, stars emerged in the darkening sky. "Today was good," Grace said quietly. "It was. I haven't felt safe like this, not in a long time." "You are safe. We'll make sure of it." She turned to face him, dish towel twisted in her hands. "Why are you doing all this? Really?" Before he could answer, Maggie called from the living room. "Daddy! Buddy's doing his trick." They found Buddy sitting perfectly still, while Maggie balanced a cookie on his nose. At her signal, he flipped it into the air and caught it, tail wagging proudly. "Mom taught him that," Grace said softly, before she got too sick. They settled on the couch, Maggie between them, Buddy stretched across all their feet. Grace read from an old storybook, her voice gentle and warm. Maggie's eyes grew heavy, her head gradually tilting onto Grace's shoulder. Daniel watched them, his daughter peaceful, Grace's face soft in the lamplight, Buddy snoring softly. Something settled deep in his chest, a recognition of rightness. This is what home feels like. The thought came unbidden but certain. Not just walls and a roof, but this. People choosing to be together, creating warmth against the cold world outside. "She's asleep," Grace whispered. "I should get her home." "Of course." But neither moved. They sat in the golden circle of lamplight, Maggie breathing evenly between them, Buddy's warmth across their feet, and Daniel thought he could stay in this moment forever. This was worth fighting for, all of it. Sunday morning arrived crisp and bright, the church filled with familiar faces, voices mingling over coffee and homemade pastries in the fellowship hall. Daniel stood with Grace near the dessert table, Maggie between them, while Buddy rested at Grace's feet on his special cushion. Mrs. Chen's apple turnovers, Grace pointed out. Best in 3 counties. Better than yours? Maggie asked innocently. Much better. I burn water. The peaceful chatter shattered as the double doors crashed open. Rick Whitfield strode in, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. The room fell silent. There she is, his voice cut through the quiet. The thief. Grace went rigid. Daniel felt her trembling beside him. You stole my property. Rick's finger jabbed toward Buddy. That dog is legally mine, and I want him back. Now. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Mrs. Chen dropped her serving spoon. Pastor Hill started forward, but Daniel moved first. He stepped in front of Grace, planting himself between her and Rick. His voice came out steady, controlled. The voice he'd learned in the army. Buddy isn't property. He's family. Family? Rick's laugh was ugly. A dog is an asset, listed in our divorce settlement. Actually, he's not. Mark emerged from the crowd, a folder in his hand. Therapy animals registered after separation aren't considered marital property. I have the documentation right here. Who the hell are you? Someone who knows the law, and someone who knows a bully when he sees one. Rick's face flushed red. This is none of your business. Any of you. His gaze swept the room. She's manipulating all of you, playing the victim like she always does. Enough. Mrs. Lawson stepped forward, all 4 feet 11 inches of her radiating indignation. Grace Whitfield is a good woman who's been through enough. You're not welcome here. Neither are your threats, added Tom from the hardware store. One by one, the congregation moved. They formed a protective circle around Grace, faces set with quiet determination. Even shy Mrs. Patterson from the library stood firm, clutching her purse like a weapon. You can't intimidate her anymore, Daniel said. She has us now. All of us, Pastor Hill confirmed, moving to stand beside Daniel. This is a house of God, Mr. Whitfield. We protect our own. Rick's eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally, finding none. His polished facade cracked. This is ridiculous, you people. Are her community, Daniel finished. Her real family. And we're telling you to leave. I'll sue. All of you, the church -- Try it. Mark held up the folder. I've got signed witness statements about your harassment, documentation of Buddy's registration, character references from half the town. You want to go to court? Let's go. The room held its breath. Rick's jaw worked, his hands clenching and unclenching. For a moment Daniel tensed, ready for violence. Then Rick laughed, bitter and sharp. You think you've won? This isn't over. Yes, it is. Daniel's voice carried the finality of a closing door. Don't come near Grace or Buddy again. Rick's gaze locked with Daniel's. 2 men measuring each other. Then Rick spun on his heel, storming toward the door. He paused at the threshold. You'll regret this, all of you. The doors slammed behind him. Silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. Then Grace's knees buckled. Daniel caught her, arms strong around her shaking shoulders. She sobbed into his chest, great gasping breaths of relief and exhaustion. The congregation pressed close, hands reaching out to touch her back, her arms surrounding her with comfort. It's okay, Daniel murmured into her hair. You're safe. You'll never stand alone again. He's gone, she whispered. Really gone? Really gone! Maggie wrapped her arms around Grace's waist. Buddy, sensing the distress, pushed between them all, pressing his warm body against Grace's legs. Pastor Hill raised his voice. Let's give them some air, folks. But Grace, we're all here, every one of us. The crowd stepped back, but didn't disperse. They hovered protectively, ready to surge forward again if needed. That evening, after the adrenaline faded and Maggie was tucked into bed at home, Daniel's phone rang. Dr. Patel's name lit the screen. Daniel, I have wonderful news. Daniel put the call on speaker, motioning for Grace to listen. An anonymous donation came through this afternoon. From a veterans charity organization. It covers everything. Buddy's surgery, post-operative care, medications, all of it. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. "The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. Can you bring him in?" "Yes," Grace managed. "Yes, absolutely." After Dr. Patel hung up, Daniel called Mark. "Don't thank me," Mark said before Daniel could speak. "Thank the organization. We help our own, remember?" Mark --. "Take care of them, brother. All of them." The line went dead. Grace stood frozen in Daniel's kitchen, tears streaming down her face. Then she launched herself at him, arms wrapping around his neck. "You did this. All of this. We did it. The whole town." She pulled back, hands gripping his shoulders, eyes fierce through her tears. "No, you stood up for me. You brought everyone together. You didn't just save Buddy." Her voice broke. "You saved me." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Daniel reached up, thumbing away her tears. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you that you weren't alone." She clutched his hand tightly, fingers interlaced with his, holding on like he might disappear. "I won't forget this, ever." Daniel squeezed back, feeling the weight of promise in their joined hands. Tomorrow, Buddy would have his surgery. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears to face. But tonight, in his small kitchen with Grace's hand in his, everything felt possible. The clinic waiting room smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Daniel checked his watch for the 20th time. 3 hours since they'd wheeled Buddy into surgery. 3 hours of Grace pacing, sitting, standing, pacing again. "Coffee?" he offered, holding up the paper cup he'd just refilled from the machine. Grace shook her head, arms wrapped tight around herself. "I can't. My stomach's in knots." Maggie sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring in a book Mrs. Lawson had packed for her. Every few minutes, she'd look up at the surgery doors. "He's strong," Daniel said, settling beside Grace on the hard plastic chairs. "He made it this far. What if something goes wrong? What if, Don't." He covered her hand with his. "Dr. Patel knows what he's doing." Grace turned her palm up, lacing their fingers together. Neither pulled away. Another hour crawled by. Other patients came and went. A woman with a yowling cat, a man carrying a rabbit. Each time the surgery doors opened, Grace jumped. "Maybe we should pray," Maggie suggested, abandoning her coloring book. She scrambled up between them, taking their free hands. They formed a small circle there in the waiting room, heads bowed while Maggie whispered words she'd learned in Sunday school. "Please watch over Buddy. He's a good dog, the best dog. And Grace needs him. We all do." "Amen," Daniel murmured. "Amen," Grace echoed, voice thick. The surgery doors swung open. Dr. Patel emerged, surgical cap in hand, exhaustion lining his face. Grace shot to her feet. "Well?" A tired smile spread across the vet's face. "The surgery was a success. We repaired the internal damage and reset the leg properly. He'll need time to heal, but Buddy's going to make a full recovery." Grace's legs gave out. Daniel caught her, holding her as she sobbed into his shoulder, great shaking sobs of relief. Maggie danced around them, squealing with joy that echoed off the clinic walls. "Can we see him?" Grace asked through her tears. "He's still under anesthesia, but you can peek in. He'll be groggy for a few hours." They followed Dr. Patel to the recovery room. Buddy lay on a padded table, bandaged and still, but his chest rose and fell steadily. Grace pressed her fingers to the glass window. "Hey, boy," she whispered. "You did it." The next days blurred together in a routine of care and recovery. Daniel stopped by Grace's farmhouse every evening after his shift, toolbox in hand. While Grace tended to Buddy's medications and bandage changes, Daniel fixed the loose porch railing, patched the leaking kitchen faucet, replaced the broken latch on the barn door. "You don't have to do all this," Grace protested on the third evening, watching him repair a cabinet hinge. "I want to." He tested the door's swing. "Besides, Maggie would never forgive me if I didn't check on Buddy." Maggie sat on the kitchen floor, gently stroking Buddy's head while he dozed. The golden retriever's tail thumped weakly whenever she spoke to him. "He likes when I read to him," Maggie announced. "I brought my library book." They fell into an easy rhythm. Grace would cook simple dinners, pot roast, spaghetti, soup, and sandwiches. Nothing fancy but filling and warm. Daniel would help with dishes while Maggie read to Buddy. Then they'd sit on the porch watching fireflies dance in the cooling autumn air. I haven't felt this. Grace paused, searching for words. Peaceful. In years. Me neither, Daniel admitted. By the second week, Buddy could manage short walks. The four of them would amble down the dirt road, Buddy limping but determined, tail wagging at every bird and butterfly. "Look, he's getting stronger," Maggie observed, skipping alongside the dog. "Just like the rest of us," Grace said softly, catching Daniel's eye. One evening, after a dinner of Grace's homemade chili, they settled in the living room. Maggie curled on the couch with Buddy's heavy head in her lap, running her small fingers through his golden fur. The dog's eyes drooped contentedly. "He's so happy," Maggie murmured. Then louder, "Daddy, Buddy says we're his family now." The words hung in the air. Grace's breath caught. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. Maggie continued, oblivious to the weight of her statement. "He told me. Dogs know these things. We belong together." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Daniel, and he saw everything in that look. Hope, fear, longing, question. Daniel set down his coffee mug. His hands trembled slightly. All the walls he'd built after losing his wife, all the careful distance he'd maintained, it crumbled under the weight of this moment. "Maggie's right," he said quietly. "We do belong together." He turned to Grace fully, gathering courage from somewhere deep. "Grace, would you like to stay in our lives? Not just as Buddy's mom, but as family?" The question hung between them, fragile as spun glass. Grace's eyes brimmed with tears. They spilled over, tracking down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. Then, finding her voice, "Yes, yes, I would." Maggie whooped, startling Buddy awake. The dog's tail thumped against the couch cushions, sensing the joy in the room. Spring arrived like a promise kept. The harsh Midwestern winter had finally released its grip, and the whole town seemed to exhale in relief. Cherry blossoms burst pink along Main Street. Daffodils pushed through the thawed earth. The world felt new again. Daniel loaded the picnic basket into his truck, the same one he'd finally gotten repaired with help from Mark's veteran fund. Grace settled into the passenger seat while Maggie bounced in the back with Buddy, who pressed his nose to the window, tail wagging. "He knows we're going somewhere fun," Maggie giggled. The park sprawled green and welcoming, dotted with families enjoying the first truly warm Saturday of the year. They found their spot under a massive oak tree, its branches heavy with fresh leaves that filtered the sunlight into dancing patterns. Grace spread the checkered blanket, while Daniel unpacked their lunch. Ham sandwiches, potato salad Grace had made that morning, fresh strawberries from the farmer's market, and a thermos of sweet tea. "Can I take Buddy to the field first?" Maggie asked, already bouncing on her toes. "After lunch," Daniel said, but Grace touched his arm. "Let them run. The food will keep." Maggie squealed and took off, Buddy bounding beside her. His gait showed no trace of the injury that had nearly claimed him. He leaped and spun, chasing Maggie in circles, both of them drunk on sunshine and freedom. "Look at him," Grace marveled. "You'd never know what he went through." "He's not the only one who healed," Daniel said quietly. Grace turned to him, her eyes soft. The months since that autumn night had transformed her. The worry lines had smoothed. The guardedness had melted away. She smiled more easily now, laughed without reservation. They ate their sandwiches in comfortable quiet, watching Maggie throw a tennis ball for Buddy. Other families picnicked nearby. Mrs. Lawson waved from across the park where she sat with her book club. Pastor Hill jogged past, calling out a greeting. "This town," Grace said, shaking her head fondly. "They really came through for us." "They came through for you," Daniel corrected. "You and Buddy. You gave them something to fight for. We all did." Maggie collapsed on the blanket, breathless and grinning. Buddy flopped beside her, panting heavily but looking thoroughly pleased with himself. Grace poured water into a collapsible bowl for him. "Can we have strawberries now?" Maggie asked. They passed the container around, the berries sweet and perfect. Juice dripped down Maggie's chin. Even Buddy got a small piece, taking it gently from Grace's fingers. As afternoon melted toward evening, they packed up the remnants of lunch. Grace rested her head against Daniel's shoulder, a gesture that had become natural over the weeks. His arm came around her automatically. "I haven't felt this safe in years," she whispered, this hopeful. Daniel's throat tightened. "I know exactly what you mean. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? If you hadn't stopped that night?" "Every day." He squeezed her hand. "But I don't think it was chance. Some things are meant to happen." "Daddy's getting mushy," Maggie announced, but her grin showed she didn't mind one bit. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in strokes of orange and pink. The spring air carried the scent of blooming flowers and fresh grass. Buddy rolled onto his back, legs in the air, completely content. "Can we do this every week, whoa?" Maggie asked suddenly. "The four of us?" Daniel looked at Grace, who nodded, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Every week," Daniel promised. "Every year, for as long as we have each other." "Forever, then," Maggie said matter-of-factly. Grace wiped away a tear, a happy one this time. For so long she'd been afraid to hope, afraid to trust in good things lasting. But here, with Daniel's solid presence beside her, Maggie's infectious joy, and Buddy's unwavering loyalty, she finally let herself believe. Second chances were real. Broken things could be made whole. "We should head home soon," Daniel said, but made no move to get up. 5 more minutes, Grace requested. 10, Maggie negotiated. They stayed until the sun touched the horizon, turning everything golden. When they finally stood, Maggie took Daniel's hand, then Grace's. Buddy walked beside them, occasionally bumping against their legs, making sure they stayed together. They crossed the field slowly, in no hurry to end this perfect day. Other families were packing up too, calling children, folding blankets, heading toward the parking lot. But Daniel, Grace, Maggie, and Buddy moved at their own pace, connected by invisible threads stronger than the trauma that had once defined them. They weren't broken pieces anymore, held together by desperation or need. They were a family, rebuilt through faith that strangers could become essential, through compassion that asked nothing in return, through love that grew quietly in small moments, shared dinners, fixed hinges, whispered prayers, and steady hands reaching out in the dark. The sunset painted them in gold as they walked toward tomorrow, together. If you enjoyed the story, I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.